Hi guys and gals, let's continue our discussion on the immune system. Let's talk about immunity, the goal of the immune system. Immunity is when we can combat a disease and or cancer and not necessarily experience the disease state. And there are multiple ways that we can become immune to a pathogen or immune to a microbe. We can have natural and artificial immunities, and these can be done passively and actively. The two primary kinds of immunity are active-passive immunity. So let's talk about active immunity to start off with. Active immunity is when we make our own antibodies. And this can happen two different ways. It can be artificial and natural active immunity. Artificial active immunity is when we intentionally expose ourselves to a form of the pathogen to activate our immune system, aka we vaccinate ourselves. Primary exposure is going to be as we develop active immunity, the primary exposure to, or the initial exposure to the pathogen or the antigen of the pathogen is going to give us a very slow response and a tepid amount of antibody production. Generally speaking, it takes about a week to initiate the first response. So if we look at the first exposure, let's say we vaccinate ourselves against smallpox. That first exposure to the smallpox vaccine is going to cause us to have a slight increase in antibody production, and then the antibodies die back down again. So we don't necessarily have a lot of antibodies produced. And it's also worth emphasizing that from the first exposure to the first antibodies being produced, generally speaking, that primary response has a 7-day lag. So when you get sick for the first time with a disease state or a new pathogen, it takes your body about 7 days to start making antibodies. And I'm counting down the days right now because I have an infection in my tear duct right now, my lacrimal, or my tear gland, my lacrimal gland, and boy, am I excited for my antibody concentration to go up and that plasma infection, or that tear duct infection to go away. Now, after we've been exposed to the pathogen, we've developed the memory cells, and the next time we're infected or we're exposed to the pathogen, our memory cells can activate our immune system and start producing plasma antibodies within a matter of hours. And that secondary response is harder, better, faster, stronger. It's going to be quicker, and we're going to have a much higher concentration of antibodies produced. This is the goal of vaccination. We expose somebody to the antigen to initiate the first exposure so that when they are exposed to the real deal, they have a high concentration of antibodies and can successfully fight off the pathogen. Active immunity is typically going to be very long-lasting and will depend both on memory B cells and memory T cells being formed. We also can have passive immunity. During passive immunity, we are not going to make the antibodies ourselves. Instead, the antibodies are going to be given to us. And there's both natural and artificial passive immunity. Natural passive immunity is when we will consume secretions from another human being, which sounds kind of creepy. I mean, I don't necessarily want to walk up to another human being and consume their secretions. But if you look at an infant with their mother, newborn infants will consume mom's breast milk all the time. That's very natural, and mom's breast milk will contain a high concentration of antibodies that give passive immunity to this young child. A common phenomenon many parents witness is when they wean their child and they stop breastfeeding their child, those infants oftentimes become quite sick because they are no longer getting mom's passive immunity. If we look at pregnant ladies, if the woman is of a negative B type, she could potentially start making antibodies that would attack a positive B type that may be growing within her uterus. So to help keep mom's immune system from killing the child in utero or for causing a miscarriage, if the mother is pregnant and she has a negative B type, she will be injected with artificially produced antibodies that bind to the positive blood type protein, the rhesus factor. This is artificial passive immunity. Another form of artificial passive immunity is when a physician injects somebody with some antibodies, let's say anti-venom, either for spider bites or for snake bites. So, guys, girls, concept check. Are vaccines a good idea? We have why are vaccines a good idea? That's kind of a presumptive question. I assume that they are a good idea. So why are they a good idea? Do they A, allow for the development of immunity without experiencing most of the symptoms of the disease? Do they reduce the spread of disease? Do they reduce healthcare cost? Or D, all of the above? Go ahead and pause the video and get me an answer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The correct answer is D, all of above. If you can develop the immunity without experiencing most of the symptoms of the disease, which is the goal of an antibody or of a vaccination, then you will fight out the disease before spreading the disease to somebody else, resulting in fewer people going to the hospital. So, hey, vaccines are a win-win all around. Let's finish up Chapter 7. Let's talk about some ways that the immune system can harm our bodies. We have allergies, tissue rejections, and immune system disorders. So let's talk about an allergy. An allergy is also known as a hypersensitivity, and this is when our immune system develops an overly aggressive response to something that is not harmful, such as pollen or a specific food type or a specific kind of dander or animal hair. This immediate allergic response, when somebody has an allergic reaction, is going to be caused by immunoglobulin E, or IgE antibodies, that attach to mast cells and basophils. As the IgE binds to the mast cells and the basophils, they release extremely large amounts of histamines. This is why many allergy medications are going to be called antihistamines. They neutralize the secretions of the mast cells and the basophils. When allergens bind to the IgE molecules, histamine will be released, and we have the allergy symptoms. So we can have two different kinds of allergic responses. An immediate allergic response is called will initiate anaphylactic shock. And this kind of allergic response is very quick and very dangerous. We also have delayed allergic responses, and these are going to be initiated by the memory T cells. Delayed allergic responses, generally speaking, are more common than immediate allergic responses. The difference is we think about the immediate allergic responses more frequently because they're much scarier and much more newsworthy compared to the delayed allergic response. Tissue rejection can occur when we receive a tissue or organ transplant from somebody else. This transplanted tissue from another human being or from another organism into your body is not recognized by your immune system as belonging there. It's not recognized as a self tissue or self cell. Now, this can be controlled artificially. We can give the patient that received the tissue transplant an immunosuppressive drug, something that will hinder the activity of their immune system. The downside of taking immunosuppressants is that the patient is going to have a compromised immune system. The upside is they won't destroy the tissue that was transplanted into their body. Right now, there's a lot of active research that's going into taking adult stem cells or multipotent stem cells, reprogramming them to become induced pluripotent stem cells, and then using those induced pluripotent stem cells to grow custom tissues and custom organs for a patient. And I should also emphasize, if you have a custom organ or tissue grown, it will perfectly match your body's MHC profile, and you will not have to take any immunosuppressive drugs after receiving the transplant. We also could have autoimmune disease. And autoimmune disease is when a cytotoxic T cell runs amok, or when our body's own antibodies attack our own cells. This is why we need regulatory T cells. These regulatory T cells, which I did not mention earlier, are a specific kind of T cell that help to kill or destroy cytotoxic T cells when they are no longer needed. If we don't have enough regulatory T cells, the cytotoxic T cells aren't destroyed quickly enough after they're no longer needed and will start to run amok. Some examples of autoimmune diseases include MS, lupus, myasthenia gravis, and rheumatoid arthritis. We also have immunodeficiency disease. These diseases are when our immune system will be compromised due to some microbe attacking our immune system. These are going to include AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, and SCID. So, guys, gals, concept check. How many times must the patient be exposed to an allergen before developing an allergy? And let's say before developing a delayed allergy. So, delayed allergy right there. 0, 1, 2, or a variable number greater than 10. Go ahead and pause the video and get me an answer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The correct number of times that a patient absolutely needs to be exposed to an allergen before developing a delayed response is at least 2 times. And I say that because delayed allergic responses require memory T cells. To make a memory T cell, you need to be exposed to the antigen the first time, and then on subsequent exposure, so on the second, third, or fourth exposure, you then can have the allergic response. The first time you rolled around in poison ivy, you did not get the reaction. But the second time you roll around in poison ivy, you can get the reaction, the contact dermatitis. Whew, man, we just flew through the immune system there. If you have any questions for me about the immune system, please feel free to stop by my office, shoot me an email, or post them on the discussion board. Happy studies!